Hashtag change the code. This hashtag has been showing up on Twitter for a while now, but it's not a trend. Most of the tweets of the hashtag are actually from Bitcoiners, but they're making fun of it. If you do a little bit of digging, you'll find that this hashtag is a part of a campaign that's run by an organization called Greenpeace USA, an organization that has been advocating for Bitcoin to change its consensus mechanism from proof of work to proof of stake, the consensus mechanism used in Ethereum. But hold up, what even is a consensus mechanism, and why is this organization so set on changing Bitcoins? In this video, I'm going to delve into the topic of proof of stake on Ethereum and figure out whether or not it's a viable alternative to proof of work. Spoiler alert, it's not. As it turns out, Ethereum is broken. But how is it that cryptos such as Ethereum so consistently convince people that their product has substance and value, even in the case of obvious scams? There's a lot to it, but I think it boils down to one major underlying issue. People constantly forget or willfully ignore this fundamental truth to which all things adhere, that there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. This principle dictates economics, and it's essentially just an acknowledgement that value doesn't just appear from thin air. Everything valuable has a cost of production. Crops don't harvest themselves, and if somebody is nice enough to spend their time and energy harvesting crops, they're not going to give them to somebody else away for free. That would mean using their time and energy and getting none in return.
What's your preferred digital currency for this exchange?
Have a fiver?
No, it's crypto only, mate.
For potatoes?
And onions.
So, in a way, the principle there ain't no such thing as a free lunch is sort of a knock-on effect of the law of conservation of energy, that energy cannot be created nor destroyed.
To show you that I'm really a believer of the conservation of energy. 3, 2, 1, 0.
Because of this, we can be pretty sure that it will apply in all cases. Still, people are often blind to this principle because they want to believe in a free lunch so much. Everybody likes the idea of a free lunch. You get something for nothing. Sounds too good to be true, and it is. So when I'm labeling proof of stake as a free lunch, I'm essentially making a statement about its failure to serve its purpose. So to understand why it's a free lunch, we first need to understand what purpose it is failing to serve.
I understand.
Do you?
Do you? This is it. I'm telling you, this is it.
Proof of stake is what we call a consensus mechanism, which, as the name suggests, is a mechanism for achieving a state of consensus, which is just a term that describes a situation where the majority of participants agree upon something. Achieving consensus in a decentralized system such as Bitcoin is tricky because there's no central authority to decide what is true and what isn't, so everyone must find alternative ways to agree. For example, your bank acts as a central authority on the true transaction history of your account. But imagine if everybody was responsible for keeping track of all of their own transactions and managing their own bank accounts. It's the difference between a full cinema of people who must agree that the list of transactions placed on the pieces of paper under their seats are the same, and placing the list of transactions on the big screen for everybody to see at once. The first option is much more tricky, and it's analogous to the task of decentralized consensus in Bitcoin. Although Bitcoin solves this problem with a consensus mechanism that's based on proof of work, in which each edition of new transactions, called blocks, are shipped with an extremely difficult computational problem that is expensive to solve. But once you have solved it, it's easy to verify that the solution was correct. Upon solving this issue, the miner will have already spent a lot of money on electricity, and if any of the transactions in their block are invalid, then the entire block will be considered invalid and rejected by the rest of the network, and they will not receive any reward, profit, for their efforts. And it's because of this that it will be in their best interest to ensure the validity of all of the transactions that they include in their block. This is where the name proof of work comes from. If somebody can provide a solution to the problem, everybody else can quickly verify it, proving that the person that solved it did genuinely put in the work to solve it, because that's the only way you can find the solution. This entire process, known as mining, allows a global network of independent computers to agree on the complete history of Bitcoin transactions, all the way back to when it started in 2009. When it comes to proof of work, you can think of it as pay as you vote. This is because you have to pay up front in order to have a chance at having a say in what transactions get added to the blockchain. This upfront cost ensures the honesty of miners, as they wouldn't want resources that they've already spent to go to waste. On the other hand, proof of stake doesn't require you to spend resources in order to participate in the network's decision-making and consensus process. Instead, you stake your tokens by temporarily locking them in a wallet for a specific amount of time. This wallet allows the network to confiscate some of your staked Ethereum if you were to break the rules, and assuming you're not planning on breaking the rules, you're not losing any resources. So being tongue-in-cheek here, while proof of work operates on a pay-as-you-vote principle, proof of stake can be described as a pause liquidity as you vote, or more specifically, pause liquidity and vote indefinitely. The integrity of Bitcoin's consensus mechanism is one of the core value propositions of the entire project, and is primarily responsible for its meteoric rise in price. Energy expenditure is the foundation of this consensus mechanism, which, in turn, is the foundation of Bitcoin's security, and without a secure Bitcoin, it would be worthless. Take note of the dependent relationship between those things. Energy expenditure goes into consensus mechanism, goes into security, produces price. So what happens if you take energy expenditure out of the equation and instead use price as the foundation of your consensus mechanism? This is a closed loop. Surely this is a great thing, right? We've successfully subverted the necessity of energy expenditure and invented a system that will remain in motion perpetually, said the inventors of the first perpetual motion machine. I joke, but you can see how it's very resemblant of one. A perpetual motion machine is a theoretical device that could stay in motion without any energy input. They're impossible to create due to the laws of thermodynamics, which state that energy cannot be created or destroyed. Perpetual motion machines are a great example of the axiom at the beginning of the video that there ain't no such thing as a free lunch. And most attempted designs of perpetual motion machines use the energy that they output and attempt to factor that back into the input, creating a closed loop that eventually just runs out of steam. Sound familiar? Using price as the basis of security, when security is the basis of price, is exactly the kind of circular reasoning that's used in the design of perpetual motion machines. And it is exactly what proof of stake does. Let me explain. So what is proof of stake and how does it work? As previously mentioned, it's a proposed alternative to proof of work that supposedly subverts the necessity of energy to keep functioning by replacing it with a temporary liquidity penalty. This is an attempt to replace the cost of energy expenditure with the cost of a temporary liquidity penalty as the primary way to disincentivize rule breaking and increase users' confidence in miners or validators' intentions to run validation scripts honestly. There are a couple key differences between this and proof of work that are worth mentioning. In proof of work, you have to incur the cost of attaining control up front via electricity expenditure. In proof of stake, the only cost is the opportunity cost of not being able to use that Ethereum for anything else during the period that you set to stake it. You only incur a permanent cost of proof of stake if you break the rules and face punishment. And it's worth noting that the amount of ETH that you stake is the only thing that disincentivizes your rule breaking, since you don't want to have any of that value confiscated. But there's a problem here. The value of the Ethereum that you've staked is dependent on the price of Ethereum. So if the price of Ethereum drops by 50%, you now have half as many reasons to act honestly. So the strength of the disincentive towards network attacks gets cut in half as soon as Ethereum's price drops by 50%. Let me reiterate, since stake is the sole source of security, proof of stake pegs the security of the entire network to the price of the token that it produces. This poses an additional death spiral risk where falling prices could cause people who have their Ethereum locked up in stake to want to withdraw all that stake so that they can sell it and not be exposed to the volatility and the downward price pressure. Now, not only is the value of all the staked Ethereum going down and the security of the network along with it, but the amount of ETH that's staked in the first place is also reducing because people are choosing to discontinue their staking periods as soon as they get the chance to take it back. When you're creating systems that are this complicated and, if all goes well, lots of people will rely on, security needs to be the most stable part of it. And the whole idea of proof of stake is to peg it directly to the most notoriously volatile aspect of the project, the token price. This sounds like a terrible idea. I mean, just to compare it to Bitcoin, if the price of Bitcoin was to drop in half, the cost of dishonesty remains unchanged, since it's priced in energy, not in Bitcoin. The same cannot be said of Ethereum, which prices the cost of dishonesty in Ethereum. These are just a few examples of the types of problems that you run into when your entire project is one massive tautology. A tautology is a statement that simply restates what is already known or assumed. It can be seen as a form of redundancy or circular reasoning since it does not add anything meaningful or important to the argument. Proof of stake simply reasserts what it assumes to be true, that the network's token, ETH, is valuable. Going back to our triangular diagram, When everything depends on everything else, nothing is truly dependable. I'm going to say that again in case Vitalik's listening. When everything depends on everything else, nothing is truly dependable. It's like a rock climber attaching his harness back onto itself. He's just one slip away from falling to ground zero. It may seem on the surface to be secure and supported, but underneath there's nothing but air. But ignoring the fact that proof of stake is fundamentally a fallacy with extra steps, there is still huge issues with it. For instance, if somebody wanted to attack Ethereum and attempt to gain control over the inclusion of transactions to the blockchain, they would only have to purchase that control like it was at a yard sale. Combine this with the fact that governments can quite literally print money. If a government wanted to destroy Ethereum, they could quite simply just print the money necessary to purchase an attack. There would be no real cost in achieving this. And if they don't want to sell their stake back to the rest of the network from whom they bought it, well, everyone's screwed. Once they gain control, there's no way for the rest of the network to regain it. In Bitcoin, users can invest more energy to counteract an attack, and it will be much easier to notice. But in proof of stake, a loss is irreversible, and one person or government or company could quite simply just spread their stake across an infinite number of staking accounts. They can create as many as they want, just like a Sybil attack that Bitcoin was designed to protect against. You can do that now with Ethereum. So one of the primary problems that stopped the creation of something as good as Bitcoin has now been successfully reinstated. If somebody was to do this style attack, they could create as many Ethereum accounts as they wanted, purchase lots of stake and spread it throughout, and since it's pseudonymous, nobody would know that one person was in control of that much stake. In fact, nobody knows who is in control of any of the stake. Unless people have disclosed and proved that they are responsible for this staking account and that staking account, there is no way of deciding or even figuring out who has the rest of it. Yeah, the extent to which Ethereum is decentralized can quite literally not be verified. We don't know if it's decentralized. We do kind of know that it's not decentralized, but never let the truth get in the way of a good punchline. Our triangular diagram is interesting because, just like a pyramid scheme, it depicts a scam that lures in its victims by capitalizing on their desire to believe in a free lunch. Unfortunately, there just ain't no such thing. Okay, this video barely scratched the surface of the problems of proof of stake, and if you want to read my more comprehensive article on it where I get into the weeds of it more, there'll be a link in the description for you to check that out if you want. But to avoid making a feature length, I'm going to end this video here. We post videos like this every single week. Subscribe if you want to learn more about Bitcoin and the surrounding topics, and leave a comment if you think anything that I said was stupid. That's just about it. Wobbly plan. Thanks for watching.